The cork exploded from the champagne bottle so sharply it ricocheted off the glass walls like a warning shot. For everyone else in the room, it was celebration. For me, Elise Dawson, it sounded like the closing of a tomb. My tomb. Across the glossy, fingerprint-smeared conference table, my cousins, Aaron and Lucas Dawson, clinked their flutes with nauseating enthusiasm. Their smiles were wide, polished, corporate, expertly crafted masks that didn't hide the gloat behind their eyes. I sat alone at the far end of the table, separated by choice and by necessity. Between us lay a stack of papers that felt heavier than steel, my termination documents. I stared at the pages. Name, my position, my release. 21 years reduced to ink and margins. Finally free, Aaron announced, raising his glass in a mock toast. His Wharton ring caught the light like a flashing signal. Dawson Innovations can finally rise to its potential. Lucas chimed in with a smirk that could curdle milk. No more deadweight in technical support. He even tilted his glass toward me, like he was offering a pity sip. Uncle Marcus only kept you around out of loyalty. That era's over. I didn't respond. My hands were steady as I reached for the pen, though inside me a storm churned. Anger, grief, betrayal, all grinding against each other like tectonic plates. I had stepped into this company when I was 17, barely old enough to drive. Back then, Dawson Innovations was nothing more than a second-hand parts manufacturer, building simple gears and switches that no one cared about. Nothing glamorous, just basic engineering. While my cousins played golf, learned how to schmooze CEOs, and took credit for things they didn't understand, I practically lived on the factory floor. I loved the scent of machine oil, the rhythm of soldering irons, the way software came alive line by line. I rebuilt systems from scratch, sketched prototypes during my lunch breaks, coded until my eyes burned. Uncle Marcus used to smile at my work the way some people look at their favorite painting. "You've got the mind of an architect, Elise," he'd say. "You see things before they exist." But my cousins, they only ever saw me as the girl with tool grease on her jeans. At 23, I designed an adaptive sensor matrix that became our first major breakthrough. They brushed it off as a fancy school project. When I later created the voice-responsive control unit that transformed the company's entire direction, they called it a Dawson family milestone. My name never made it to the press release. But the patents, those told the real story. Every single one listed me as the inventor. The company might have owned the products but not the inventorship. And inventorship is the one thing law refuses to reassign. I signed the termination papers with a flourish that probably looked like defeat from their side of the table. "Key card," Lucas snapped. "And the company phone." I placed both on the table and stood. "Oh, Elise," Aaron called after me. "Remember the non-compete clause. No tech work for any competitor for 3 years." I paused at the door, turned slightly, and gave him a cold, clean smile. I remember everything. Because what they never bothered to read was the one clause that would unravel everything they believed they controlled. Sometimes the moment someone tries to erase you becomes the moment you finally discover your power. For the next few weeks, I tried to pretend that life was normal. I went to school. I walked past the same hallways, sat in the same classrooms, listened to the same lectures. But everything felt different. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was loud. Loud enough that I could hear every unspoken word behind people's glances. Loud enough that I could feel the weight of my own unasked questions. Why did they pick me? What did I do wrong? Why did I freeze? The uncertainty slowly began turning into something heavier. Guilt. Not guilt for what I'd done, but guilt for what I hadn't done, for not standing up for myself in that moment. It felt as though I had left a version of myself behind in that cafeteria, and every day since, I had been walking without him. One evening, as I sat alone on the rooftop of our building, the sky around me dimming into shades of violet and amber, I asked myself a hard question. Am I really going to spend the rest of my life being afraid of people who don't even know me? It was the kind of question that forces you to grow, even if you don't feel ready. That night something shifted. Not a dramatic transformation. No sudden burst of confidence. Just a quiet decision. One so small that no one else could see it, but one that would end up changing everything. I would no longer let fear decide who I was going to be. The next morning I woke up before the sun. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew I needed something. Some way to break the cycle. As I walked outside, the cold morning breeze hit my face, and for the first time in a long time I felt awake. Truly awake. I wandered into a nearby park, still empty because of the early hour. An older man stood there alone, practicing slow, deliberate martial arts movements. Taekwondo, I guessed. His motions were calm but powerful, like each movement carried intention. I watched quietly from a distance, mesmerized. After a few minutes, he noticed me standing there and gave a small, welcoming nod. "You're up early," he said, lowering his arms. "I couldn't sleep," I replied. He smiled knowingly. "Then you're here for a reason." I hesitated. "I don't even know what that reason is." He motioned for me to come closer. Most people don't. They only discover it when they stop running from themselves. There was something about the way he said it, simple, gentle, yet piercing. Without fully understanding why, I asked, "Can you teach me?" He studied me for a few long seconds before responding. "I can. But I won't teach you how to fight others. Only how to stop fighting yourself." It wasn't the answer I expected, but it was the one I needed. And so, under the soft morning light, my first lesson began. Not in punches or kicks, but in balance, breathing, and awareness. It was harder than it looked, but in that difficulty I felt something unfamiliar: control. As the sun finally rose, painting the sky in gold, the man said something that stuck with me. "Strength doesn't start in the hands. It starts in the heart, once you decide you deserve peace." That sentence echoed in my mind the entire walk home. I still didn't know where this journey would lead me. I didn't know if I would ever confront the people who humiliated me. But for the first time since that day in the cafeteria, felt a direction, spark, beginning. The next morning my body ached. Not the sharp kind of pain you get from bruises, but the deep, quiet soreness that comes from using muscles you didn't even know existed. Oddly enough, it felt good. Felt like progress, like proof that I was doing something rather than just thinking about doing something. I returned to the park at the same early hour. The old man, whose name I still didn't know, was already there, practicing the same slow, intentional movements. This time he didn't wait for me to approach. He simply nodded as if I had always been expected. "You came back," he said. "I said I wanted to learn," I replied. He pointed to my stance. "Then stand like someone who means it." That was the first of many lessons. They weren't dramatic. There were no action movie moments, no sudden bursts of skill. What I learned came in small, almost invisible steps, correcting my posture, adjusting my breathing, grounding my weight through my heels. Over time, those tiny corrections began forming something steady inside me. After about 2 weeks, he finally asked, "Do you know why you're here?" I hesitated. "Because I was tired of feeling weak." He shook his head gently. "Feeling weak isn't the problem. Believing that weakness defines you, that is the real fight." His words carried the kind of truth that takes time to sink in. I learned his name eventually. Master Halim, though he didn't insist on titles. He didn't talk much about his past, but there were moments, brief, unguarded ones, where I saw something in his eyes. Experience. Discipline forged from something difficult. Maybe that was why he understood me without me saying much. One day, after finishing an exercise, he asked, "What happened to you?" Caught me off guard. Until then, I had never explained the cafeteria incident. But the words came out easier than I expected. I told him how they pushed me, how everyone laughed, how I froze. Not because I was scared of them, but because I was scared of becoming something I didn't want to be. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "You were not afraid of them," he said. "You were afraid of your reaction. That is the hardest fear to face." He stepped closer. "Tell me, what do you want now?" "Revenge." I swallowed. "No. I want to not be afraid anymore." He smiled, and for the first time, I saw genuine approval in his expression. "Then you are ready for the real lessons." The next weeks were different. He pushed me harder, not physically but mentally. He made me repeat the same movements until they felt like second nature. He made me close my eyes while balancing on uneven ground. He made me control my breathing while holding difficult stances. The training didn't make me stronger in the way people usually measure strength. Made me steady, present, aware. But despite all the progress, a part of me still wondered what would happen if I faced the boys from the cafeteria again. I didn't crave confrontation. I didn't want a fight. I just wanted to see whether the new version of me would remain calm, or collapse back into who I used to be. And as fate would have it, that test arrived sooner than I expected. One afternoon on my way home, I heard a familiar voice behind me. A voice I hoped I wouldn't have to hear so soon. Look who it is, the silent hero. I froze, not from fear this time, but from the unexpected timing. I turned around slowly, feeling my heartbeat settle instead of spike. This was the moment I had been unknowingly walking toward. Emotional hook. Growth doesn't mean you stop being afraid. It means that when fear returns, you're finally ready to look it in the eyes. Sometimes the biggest changes in our lives begin with a single, quiet decision, the kind no one notices except the person who finally decides to choose themselves. Would you like me to continue with part 3? The next morning my body ached. Not the sharp kind of pain you get from bruises, but the deep, quiet soreness that comes from using muscles you didn't even know existed. Oddly enough, it felt good. It felt like progress, like proof that I was doing something rather than just thinking about doing something. I returned to the park at the same early hour. The old man, whose name I still didn't know, was already there, practicing the same slow, intentional movements. This time he didn't wait for me to approach. He simply nodded as if I had always been expected. "You came back," he said. "I said I wanted to learn," I replied. He pointed to my stance. "Then stand like someone who means it." That was the first of many lessons. They weren't dramatic. There were no action movie moments, no sudden bursts of skill. What I learned came in small, almost invisible steps, correcting my posture, adjusting my breathing, grounding my weight through my heels. Over time, those tiny corrections began forming something steady inside me. After about 2 weeks, he finally asked, "Do you know why you're here?" I hesitated. "Because I was tired of feeling weak." He shook his head gently. "Feeling weak isn't the problem. Believing that weakness defines you, that is the real fight." His words carried the kind of truth that takes time to sink in. I learned his name eventually. Master Halim, though he didn't insist on titles. He didn't talk much about his past, but there were moments, brief, unguarded ones, where I saw something in his eyes. Experience. Discipline forged from something difficult. Maybe that was why he understood me without me saying much. One day, after finishing an exercise, he asked, "What happened to you?" Caught me off guard. Until then, I had never explained the cafeteria incident. But the words came out easier than I expected. I told him how they pushed me, how everyone laughed, how I froze. Not because I was scared of them, but because I was scared of becoming something I didn't want to be. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "You were not afraid of them," he said. "You were afraid of your reaction. That is the hardest fear to face." He stepped closer. "Tell me, what do you want now?" "Revenge." I swallowed. "No. I want to not be afraid anymore." He smiled, and for the first time, I saw genuine approval in his expression. "Then you are ready for the real lessons." The next weeks were different. He pushed me harder, not physically but mentally. He made me repeat the same movements until they felt like second nature. He made me close my eyes while balancing on uneven ground. He made me control my breathing while holding difficult stances. The training didn't make me stronger in the way people usually measure strength. Made me steady, present, aware. But despite all the progress, a part of me still wondered what would happen if I faced the boys from the cafeteria again. I didn't crave confrontation. I didn't want a fight. I just wanted to see whether the new version of me would remain calm, or collapse back into who I used to be. And as fate would have it, that test arrived sooner than I expected. One afternoon on my way home, I heard a familiar voice behind me. A voice I hoped I wouldn't have to hear so soon. Look who it is, the silent hero. I froze, not from fear this time, but from the unexpected timing. I turned around slowly, feeling my heartbeat settle instead of spike. This was the moment I had been unknowingly walking toward. Growth doesn't mean you stop being afraid. It means that when fear returns, you're finally ready to look it in the eyes. There they were, 3 of them. The same boys from the cafeteria. Same swagger, same careless confidence. But something was different this time. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was the way the ground felt firm beneath my feet, or the way my breath stayed steady instead of shaky. The one in front, the tallest, smirked. "Did you miss us?" His voice was a mix of mockery and arrogance, the kind that feeds off reaction. The old version of me, the one who lived inside silence, might have looked down or backed away. But I didn't. I didn't step forward either. I simply stood, grounded, present, just like Master Halim taught me. "What do you want?" I asked calmly. He raised an eyebrow, surprised by the tone. "Oh, You talk now. The others snickered, expecting me to crumble. But the laughter didn't hit me the same way anymore. It didn't fill my chest with shame. It didn't twist into my gut. Just passed over me like noise. The tall one stepped closer, invading my space. We're just saying hello. Problem. I looked at him. Not with anger, not with fear, but with a quiet curiosity. No problem. That startled him more than if I had shouted. Bullies thrive on predictable reactions. Fear, defensiveness, panic. Calmness is something they don't know how to handle. He narrowed his eyes, confused. You think you're tough now? No, I said. I just know who I am now. The words weren't rehearsed. They rose from somewhere inside me, from the hours of training, from the weight of my decision that night on the rooftop, from every breath I'd steadied under Master Halim's guidance. He didn't know what to do with that. He scoffed, trying to regain control. Whatever. Just don't get in our way. They walked past me, laughing again, but this time the laughter wasn't aimed at me. It was aimed at confusion, discomfort, frustration. They had expected a victim. But the person standing there wasn't one anymore. When they were gone, I exhaled the breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from the adrenaline of choosing a different reaction than the one I'd lived with for years. Later that day, I met Master Halim at the park. He noticed the tension in my shoulders immediately. You faced something today. He nodded. They showed up. And you? He asked. I stayed calm. He hesitated. I didn't fight. I didn't run. I just stayed. He smiled gently, the kind of smile that carried pride without exaggeration. Good. You have learned the first lesson of strength, restraint. That surprised me. I thought strength was about power. No, he said, shaking his head. Strength is having the power and choosing not to use it unless absolutely necessary. We continued training, but my mind kept drifting back to the moment earlier that afternoon. Not the confrontation itself, but the way I felt afterward. Steady, rooted, complete in a way I hadn't felt in years. That evening, as I walked home, the sky painted in soft streaks of orange, I realized something important. It wasn't the boys I had faced today. It was the old version of me, the one who lived quietly in fear, the one who believed silence was safety. And for the first time, that version didn't win. Sometimes the bravest moment in your life isn't when you fight back. It's when you finally stop fighting yourself. The days that followed felt strangely lighter. Not because my problems had disappeared, but because I'd finally stopped hiding from them. Something inside me had opened, the way a clenched fist slowly relaxes after holding on for too long. And in that slow release, I found a kind of quiet freedom. Training with Master Halim became a routine, not a struggle. I no longer dragged myself out of bed. I woke up before my alarm, pulled by a sense of purpose I couldn't have imagined months earlier. My movements, once stiff and uncertain, began to flow with a rhythm that felt natural, almost familiar, like I was rediscovering something I had always carried but never learned to use. One morning, after completing a long sequence of forms, Master Halim held up a hand. Stop! I froze mid-motion, confused. Did I do something wrong? He shook his head. No, you did something right. He circled me slowly, observing my stance, my breath, the tension, or lack of it, in my body. You've stopped trying to prove something, he said. Now you simply are. I didn't fully understand what he meant, but deep down, a part of me knew he wasn't talking about martial arts. Before training ended that day, he handed me a small, worn cloth. What's this? Yes. He nodded toward my forehead. Wipe your sweat. I laughed, thinking he was joking. But when I unfolded the cloth, my breath caught. Embroidered on the corner, nearly faded from years of use, was a single word. Sabr. Patience. He saw the recognition in my eyes. This was given to me by my teacher, he said. I carried it for decades. Through wins. Through losses. Through mistakes. He placed a hand on my shoulder. Now it belongs to you. I swallowed, unsure how to respond. I don't think I deserve this. He gave a soft smile. Then keep training until you do. That moment stayed with me long after training ended for the day. School, things shifted in subtle ways. People still whispered occasionally, but their voices didn't stick to me anymore. I walked differently. Not arrogantly, not defensively. Just with a sense of ease I hadn't known before. Even the teachers seemed to notice. But the biggest change happened in class one afternoon. We were doing group work, and for the first time I didn't sit quietly on the edge of the table. I spoke. Not loudly, not to stand out. Just enough to contribute. Enough to be part of the world instead of a shadow behind it. My classmates looked at me with mild surprise, but no one mocked me. Some even nodded, as if realizing I had always been there but had never allowed myself to be seen. Later that day, as I walked home, I caught my reflection in a shop window. Not physically I looked the same. But the way I held myself was different. My shoulders weren't curled inward anymore. My gaze wasn't fixed on the ground. For the first time in a long time I saw someone I could respect. Not because he was strong in the way people measure strength, but because he was trying, growing, becoming. That evening, Master Halim's words echoed again in my mind. You don't train to impress others. You train to meet the person you're capable of becoming. And for the first time I believed that person was real. Sometimes the most powerful transformation isn't the one others notice. It's the moment you finally recognize yourself. Life didn't suddenly turn perfect. That's the thing about growth, it doesn't erase the past, it just gives you new tools to carry it differently. But something inside me had settled, like a storm that had finally run out of places to rage. Weeks turned into months. Training became as normal as breathing, but the purpose had changed. First, I trained to stop being afraid. Then I trained to become stronger. But now, I trained simply because it brought me peace. One crisp morning, as the sky warmed from gray to rose-colored light, Master Halim and I finished a long session. I wiped my face with a cloth he had given me, its fabric soft with age, its message as steady as ever. He looked at me with a calm, appraising gaze. Tell me, he said, why do you train now? I didn't need time to think. Because it helps me hear myself. He nodded, as if he had been waiting for that answer since the day I arrived. Then you have learned the final lesson. I frowned. Final lesson. He smiled gently. The world outside will always shift. People will always judge. Circumstances will always challenge you. But if you can remain steady within yourself, then no one can take your peace away. Something in me softened at those words. Maybe it was acceptance. Maybe it was understanding. Maybe it was both. A few days later I faced an unexpected test. Not one of strength but of choice. I was walking home through the school courtyard when I saw the same boys who had pushed me months earlier. They weren't alone this time. A younger student stood in front of them, clutching his backpack tightly, eyes wide with a fear I knew too well. The scene hit me like an echo from my past. For a moment time slowed. The urge to intervene surged within me. Not from anger, but from recognition. But I didn't rush in recklessly. I approached with calm steps, steady breath, and a clear mind. Is everything okay here? Yes. The tall boy turned, annoyance flashing in his eyes. This isn't your problem. No, I said quietly. But he's not your problem either. Something in my tone must have struck him. The tension in his posture tightened, then cracked. He clicked his tongue in frustration, muttered something to his friends, and shoved past me as he walked away. The younger student exhaled shakily, relief flooding his face. Thank you, he whispered. I smiled softly. You're okay now. Go on. As he hurried off, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt whole. Like I had closed a circle I didn't know was still open. That evening I told Master Halim what happened. He listened quietly, then placed a hand over his heart. You did not fight, he said. You did not fear. You simply stood. He nodded. That is strength. Walking home later the world felt different. Not because it had changed but because I had. The sky seemed wider. The air felt lighter. Even my footsteps sounded more certain against the pavement. I wasn't the silent boy from the cafeteria anymore. I wasn't the scared version of myself hiding behind quietness. I wasn't the person who doubted his own worth. I had become someone I could respect. Someone I could trust. Someone who chose peace. Not because he feared conflict, but because he understood its value. Real strength isn't loud. It doesn't demand attention. It grows quietly inside you, until one day you look in the mirror and realize you've become someone your past self would be proud of.